Historians, this video is about African American civic participation and the Freedmen's Bureau during Reconstruction. Let's first read from the Pearson textbook. Rebuilding the South. Reconstruction had many successes. The Freedmen's Bureau had been created by President Lincoln to help freed slaves and refugees of the war. Congress strengthened the Bureau to help the 4 million recently freed slaves. The Freedmen's Bureau built schools and hospitals. It hired African American and white teachers from the South and North. New leaders raised taxes to help rebuild roads and railroads and to establish a free education system. Many industries were expanded to provide more jobs. For the first time, African Americans became elected officials. In Mississippi, 2 African Americans were elected to the U.S. Senate. In 1870, Hiram R. Revels won the Senate seat that Jefferson Davis once held, and in 1874, Blanche K. Bruce was elected to the Senate. 20 other African Americans were elected to the House of Representatives, and many were also elected to their local and state governments. This is a picture of the Freedmen's Bureau teaching sewing, teaching new skills. So they would open not just school for kids, but they would open schools and classes to teach new skills so they could get jobs. The Freedmen's Bureau was established to help the 4 million freedmen or former slaves after the war. The Freedmen's Bureau built hospitals and schools for blacks in the South. The Bureau hired black and white teachers from the North and the South. For the first time in the United States history, African Americans became elected officials. In Mississippi, 2 African Americans were elected United States senators. In 1870, Republican Hiram R. Revels, a minister and teacher, was elected to the Senate seat that Jefferson Davis held before the Civil War. In 1874, Blanche K. Bruce, a former slave, was elected to the Senate. 20 other African Americans from the South were also elected to the House of Representatives. And this is a picture of Hiram Hiram Arch Revels, who was elected to the Senate. And this was from the Scott Forsman text. So some important things to know about the civic participation. Many African Americans started participating in politics, including running for office and voting. Many African Americans served local, state, and U.S. governments. Now the Freedmen's Bureau. The Freedmen's Bureau was created by Lincoln to help freed slaves. Freedmen's Bureau created hospitals, churches, and schools. And the Freedmen's Bureau also helped build roads and railroads. And remember when we learned about Sojourner Truth, she was one of the first people on the Freedmen's Bureau, and Lincoln had put her there and kind of to start it. And so this was all about civic participation by African Americans and the Freedmen's Bureau during Reconstruction.